Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars shift and bend as his ship moved through hyperspace. The year was 2387, and this was humanity's first real journey beyond the edge of known space. For centuries, humans had spread to nearby star systems, but something had always blocked them from going further. Strange gravitational fields that appeared whenever their ships tried to push deeper into the galaxy. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lisa Rodriguez from the tactical station. Her fingers danced over the control panels as data flowed across her screens. "There's a massive artificial structure ahead. It's huge." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the readings. The structure was bigger than Earth's moon and made of materials their scanners couldn't identify. "Any signs of life?" "Lots of them," Pete Williams called out from the engineering station. His face was pale as he studied the energy readings. "Captain, this thing is putting out more power than our entire home fleet combined." Dr. Amy Clark, the ship's science officer, looked up from her research console with excitement in her eyes. "Jake, I think I know what this is. Remember those gravitational barriers that kept us from exploring further? I think this structure is what's been creating them." Before Jake could respond, the ship shook violently. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge as their hyperspace engine shut down. They had been pulled back into normal space by some kind of tractor beam. "Multiple contacts approaching," Lisa reported, her voice tight with worry. 12 ships, all bigger than anything in our database. They're moving in formation like they've done this 1,000 times before. Jake's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. "Open a channel. Let's see if they want to talk." The main screen flickered to life, showing a face that was clearly not human. The being had silver skin, 4 arms, and eyes that glowed with cold blue light. When it spoke, the words came through the universal translator in a voice that sounded bored and superior. "Primitive vessel, you have entered restricted space. I am Commander Zexithara of the Alpha Dominion. You will surrender your ship immediately." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We're explorers, not invaders. We didn't know this space was restricted." Zexithara's expression didn't change. "Your ignorance is not our concern. You are humans, yes? We have been watching your species for some time. You are quarantined in your small corner of space for good reason." "Quarantined?" Amy stepped up beside Jake. "What do you mean, quarantined?" "Your species shows dangerous signs of unpredictability," Zexithara explained as if talking to children. "The Alpha Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years through perfect order and control. Humans threaten that order with your chaotic nature and inability to accept proper hierarchy." The alien ships moved closer, surrounding the Defiance. Jake could see they were sleek and powerful, with weapon systems that made human technology look like toys. "We have controlled 847 star systems for millennia," Zexithara continued. 7 great races form the Alpha Dominion, and we have brought peace and order to countless lesser species. But humans are different. You adapt too quickly. You change too fast. You refuse to stay in your place." Pete looked at his readings and whispered to Jake, "Captain, they're scanning our entire ship. Our computers, our weapons, everything." "Fascinating," Zexithara said after a moment. "Your technology is primitive, yet you've created innovations we did not expect. This confirms our decision to keep you isolated was correct." Lisa's hands moved to her weapons controls, but Jake shook his head slightly. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Fighting now would only get them all killed. "What do you want from us?" Jake asked. "You will come with us to Processing Station Omega-7. There you will join the other humans we have collected for study." Amy's eyes widened. "Other humans? You've been taking our people?" "Only from the colonies on the very edge of your territory," Zexithara said casually. "Small settlements that your government doesn't even know exist. They make excellent test subjects. We are very interested in understanding how human neural patterns work." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "How many?" "Several thousand over the past few decades. They are helping us understand the human threat so we can develop better containment methods." The Defiance shuddered as the alien ships locked onto them with some kind of capture beam. Jake watched helplessly as his ship was pulled toward one of the massive alien vessels. "Captain," Pete said quietly, "I'm recording everything on the backup systems. If we ever get out of here, Earth needs to know about this." Jake nodded. As they were drawn into the alien ship's hangar bay, he got his first close look at Alpha Dominion technology. Everything was perfectly smooth and symmetrical. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and flowed. Robotic workers moved in precise patterns, never wasting a single motion. When the hangar doors sealed shut behind them, Zexathara appeared on the screen again. You will be processed and assigned to work groups according to your abilities. Do not attempt to resist. The Alpha Dominion has dealt with thousands of lesser species. You are not special. But as Jake looked around at his crew, he saw something in their eyes that he doubted Zexathara understood. Lisa was already studying the alien technology, looking for weaknesses. Pete was memorizing the layout of the hangar bay. Amy was taking mental notes about everything she observed. Humans might be primitive compared to the Alpha Dominion, but they had one thing the aliens seemed to have forgotten about. They never gave up. They never accepted that something was impossible. As armed alien guards approached their ship, Jake made a quiet promise to himself. Somehow, some way, he would get his crew home, and when he did, Earth would learn the truth about what was happening in the galaxy. The Alpha Dominion thought they had caught some primitive explorers who had wandered too far from home. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in their 3,000-year history. The age of Alpha rule was about to end, and it would end because they had underestimated the one species in the galaxy that specialized in doing the impossible. 6 months after their capture, Jake Morrison and his crew found themselves working in the processing centers of Station Omega-7. The Alphas had separated them, thinking this would break their spirit. They were wrong. Jake worked in the data analysis section, where he pretended to be a simple technician while actually mapping the entire Alpha communication network. Lisa had been assigned to weapons maintenance, giving her access to Alpha military technology. Pete worked in engineering, learning how their power systems functioned. Amy was in the research labs where the Alphas were studying captured humans. What the Alphas didn't realize was that humans were studying them right back. The neural scans show fascinating patterns. Dr. Amy overheard one of the Alpha scientists saying to another, "Human brain activity is completely unpredictable. Look at these readings. No two humans think the same way, even when given identical problems." The scientist, a tall creature with green skin and 6 arms, pointed at a screen full of data. "This explains why they're so dangerous. Our computer models can predict the behavior of any other species with 97% accuracy. But humans? Our best models are only 23% accurate." Amy pretended to clean equipment while listening to every word. She had learned that the Alphas saw the galaxy like a giant machine, where every species had a specific role and function. They couldn't understand beings that refused to follow predictable patterns. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Jake was making a disturbing discovery. The Alpha communication log showed the locations of dozens of human settlements that Earth didn't even know existed, colonies that had been captured and their populations enslaved. One file made his blood run cold. It was labeled Final Solution Protocol and described a plan to eliminate all human colonies within the next solar cycle. The Alphas had decided that humans were too unpredictable to be controlled and too dangerous to be allowed to spread further. But Jake also found something that gave him hope. Hidden in the data streams were messages between human slaves on different worlds. They were using old Earth military codes that the Alphas hadn't recognized as communication. The messages told stories of resistance. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a woman named Rebecca Stone had organized the other human workers into a secret network. They were planning something big. 3 weeks later, Jake's hopes were confirmed when emergency alarms began blaring throughout the station. Alpha guards ran through the corridors as reports came in from across their territory. "Impossible," shouted Commander Zexathara as she burst into the command center. "How are primitive humans destroying our mining operations?" On the main screen, Jake could see footage from Kepler 442b. Human workers had somehow turned mining equipment into weapons. They had used explosive charges meant for breaking rocks to destroy the Alpha control towers. But that wasn't the most impressive part. The humans had coordinated their attack using the mining tunnels as a communication network, tapping out messages in old Earth Morse code through the metal supports. They had been planning this revolt for months, and the Alpha overseers had never suspected anything because they couldn't imagine that humans would use such primitive methods. Rebecca Stone appeared on the captured security footage, leading a group of humans as they took control of the main facility. She moved with the confidence of someone who had been a soldier before becoming a miner. The Alphas had made the mistake of assuming that human slaves were just workers, not realizing that many of them had military training. "Send the 7th Fleet to crush this rebellion," Zexathara ordered. But before the fleet could launch, more reports came in. Human uprisings were happening on 12 different worlds, all coordinated to begin at exactly the same time. The rebels were using captured Alpha equipment in ways the original designers had never intended. Jake watched with growing pride as his fellow humans proved once again that they could adapt to any situation. On one world, they had turned atmosphere processors into weapons that could level entire city blocks. On another, they had reprogrammed mining robots to fight the Alpha Guards. But the most brilliant part was how they had spread the rebellion. The Alphas had moved human prisoners between worlds to prevent them from forming attachments to any one place. They thought this would make humans easier to control. Instead, it had created a galaxy-wide network of people who knew each other and could coordinate resistance activities. While the Alphas scrambled to respond to the uprisings, Jake received a coded message through the station's maintenance system. It was from Lisa, who had been working in the weapons bay. "I've learned how to modify their communication arrays," the message said. "I can send a signal to Earth, but only for a few minutes before they detect it." Jake knew this was their chance. He began composing a message that would change everything. 3 days later, Earth received a transmission that Admiral Kevin Brooks initially thought was a hoax. The message was short but devastating. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Defiance. We are alive and being held prisoner by an alien empire called the Alpha Dominion. They have been capturing human colonies for decades. Thousands of our people are enslaved across the galaxy. The Dominion plans to eliminate all human settlements within 1 year. They have technology far beyond ours, but they are not invincible. Their greatest weakness is that they cannot understand unpredictability. Do not attempt conventional rescue. That would only get more people killed. Instead, prepare for war, but fight it the human way. Use everything that makes us different from them. Our chaos is their order's greatest enemy." Admiral Brooks read the message 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of Earth's military leadership. For hours, they debated whether this could be real. The idea that aliens had been secretly capturing human colonies seemed like something from a science fiction story. But then more evidence arrived. Deep space monitoring stations detected the energy signatures that Jake had described. Long-range telescopes found evidence of the gravitational barriers that had been keeping humanity isolated. Dr. Amy's part of the plan activated when she managed to smuggle a sample of Alpha computer code back to Earth through a returning supply drone. When Earth's best programmers analyzed it, they discovered something remarkable. The Alpha computer systems were incredibly advanced, but completely predictable. They followed perfect logical patterns with no room for random variables. This made them incredibly efficient, but also vulnerable to the kind of chaotic thinking that humans excelled at. "It's like they've never encountered a computer virus," Earth's top programmer explained to Admiral Brooks. "Their systems have no defenses against malicious code because they can't imagine anyone would want to make their perfect systems work improperly." As Earth began to understand the true scope of the threat they faced, Jake and his crew continued their secret work aboard Station Omega-7. They were no longer prisoners waiting to be rescued. They had become advanced scouts for humanity's first galactic war. The Alpha Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years through perfect order and predictable patterns. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to follow any rules at all. Earth's response to the Alpha threat came faster than anyone expected, but it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching thousands of small ships launch from hidden construction facilities across the solar system. These weren't the massive warships that Earth's military had originally planned to build. Instead, they were small, fast vessels that looked more like swarms of angry insects than a proper fleet. "Operation Wildcard is now active," Brooks announced to his commanders. "Remember, we're not trying to match their firepower. We're going to overwhelm them with sheer unpredictability." Each of the 50,000 ships launching from Earth space was different. Some were modified cargo haulers with weapons bolted onto their hulls. Others were custom-built fighters designed by garage mechanics and amateur engineers. Many were controlled by artificial intelligence systems that had been programmed not with military tactics, but with patterns learned from video games, street racing, and extreme sports. The plan was simple in concept, but impossible for the Alpha Dominion to counter. Instead of fighting like a traditional military force, humanity would fight like a virus. Fast, adaptive, and completely unpredictable. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Harper led the first test of this new strategy at Proxima Junction, a major Alpha supply route. His force consisted of just 500 human ships against an Alpha battle group of 50 massive cruisers. The Alpha commander, a proud Kytherian named Vextal, laughed when he saw the approaching human forces on his screens. "These primitives send toy ships against us? This will be over in minutes." But when the battle began, nothing went according to Alpha expectations. Instead of attacking in formation, the human ships scattered in all directions. Some flew in spirals. Others moved in zigzag patterns that seemed completely random. A few actually flew backwards while shooting, using their rear-mounted engines as weapons. Vextal's weapons officers couldn't get target locks on ships that refused to fly in straight lines. Their advanced targeting computers had been designed to predict enemy movements based on logical tactical decisions. But the humans weren't making logical decisions. They were making decisions that worked. "Sir, one of their ships is spinning like a drill while firing in 3 different directions," reported a confused Alpha weapons officer. "Our computer says this is impossible. Then destroy it," Vextal ordered. But before his guns could track the spinning ship, it had already damaged 2 Alpha cruisers and disappeared behind an asteroid. Meanwhile, a group of human ships had linked together to form a chain that whipped through the Alpha formation, like a massive spaceborne whip, their combined fire cutting through shields that were designed to stop conventional attacks. The most devastating moment came when a group of human ships that appeared to be retreating suddenly reversed direction and flew directly through the Alpha formation. But instead of trying to shoot their way through, they released clouds of what the Alphas first thought was chaff. It wasn't chaff. It was Dr. Amy Clark's latest creation, viral warfare programs contained in microscopic capsules. Within minutes, Alpha ships began firing on each other as their computer systems were rewritten by human malware. The virus didn't just hack their systems, it made their ships think that other Alpha vessels were human attackers. Vextal watched in horror as his own flagship's weapons turned against his escort ships. "What kind of weapon is this?" he demanded. His science officer studied the readings with growing panic. "Sir, it's not a weapon in any conventional sense. It's a program that teaches our computers to think wrong. Our systems are learning to be chaotic instead of logical." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Alpha battle group. Only Vextal's command ship survived, and only because Nick Harper allowed it to escape so it could report what had happened. News of the victory at Proxima Junction spread throughout both human and Alpha space, but with very different reactions. Humans celebrated their first major victory against a superior foe. The Alpha Dominion leadership was baffled and terrified. "How do we fight an enemy that has no strategy?" demanded High Commander Zorthak during an emergency session of the Alpha Council. "Our war computers have run 10 million simulations, and humans win 97% of them simply because we cannot predict what they will do next." Meanwhile, Lisa Rodriguez had managed to escape from Station Omega-7 during the confusion of the human uprisings. She hadn't returned to Earth, though. Instead, she had begun making contact with other species oppressed by the Alpha Dominion. Her first success came with the Aryans, a bird-like species that had been forced to serve as messengers and scouts for the Alpha military. Captain Crixtal of the Aryan Resistance met with Lisa in secret on a neutral trading post. "Your species interests us greatly," Crixtal said, his feathers ruffling with excitement. "The Alphas have ruled through fear and superior technology for so long that most species forgot rebellion was possible. But you humans, you make the impossible look easy," Lisa smiled. "We've had a lot of practice. Earth has a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you have no choice but to adapt or die, you get very good at finding new solutions to old problems." Within weeks, Lisa had formed an alliance with 12 different oppressed species. Each brought unique abilities to the growing rebellion. The Aryans provided incredible mobility and scouting capabilities. The Crystalline Collective shared their knowledge of mineral-based technology. The Vorthon traders offered access to supply networks that spanned half the galaxy. But most importantly, they all learned from humanity's example. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together, united by their hatred of Alpha oppression and inspired by humanity's refusal to accept defeat. Back on Earth, Pete Williams had been working with a team of engineers to develop new weapons based on the Alpha technology that Amy had analyzed. But instead of trying to copy Alpha designs, they focused on creating systems that could adapt and change during battle. The Alphas build perfect weapons for specific purposes, Pete explained to a gathering of military engineers. But perfect weapons can only handle situations they were designed for. Our weapons don't have to be perfect. They just have to be flexible. His team's greatest creation was the adaptive strike system, weapons that could reconfigure themselves based on what they encountered. A missile that could turn into a boarding pod, a laser cannon that could become a communication array, a fighter ship that could split apart to become 3 smaller ships, or link with others to form a larger vessel. The Alpha Dominion had never encountered weapons that could change their fundamental nature during combat. Their advanced shields and armor were designed to stop specific types of attacks. When human weapons changed types mid-flight, Alpha defenses became useless. As human forces continued to spread chaos throughout Alpha space, more and more oppressed species began joining the rebellion. The Alpha Dominion found themselves fighting not just humans, but a coalition of dozens of different species, each contributing their own unique capabilities to the war effort. What made the coalition truly unstoppable was that humans had taught them the most important lesson of all. Diversity was not a weakness to be controlled, but a strength to be celebrated. The Alpha Dominion's perfect. Order was no match for the beautiful chaos of free peoples working together. Hi. Commander Zorthak stared at the tactical displays, showing human activity across Alpha space, and finally understood the scope of the threat they faced. This wasn't just a war against one primitive species. This was a revolution that threatened the very foundation of Alpha rule. Send word to all Alpha fleets, he ordered. Full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. If we don't stop the humans now, our 3,000-year empire ends with them. The final phase of the war began when human forces launched simultaneous attacks on all 7 Alpha homeworlds. Each assault was completely different, making it impossible for the Alpha Dominion to develop a unified defense strategy. Captain Jake Morrison had finally escaped from Station Omega-7 and now commanded a massive fleet heading toward Kythera Prime, the capital world of the Alpha Dominion. His force included ships from 23 different species, each bringing their own tactical traditions and technologies to the fight. This is what the Alphas never understood, Jake said to his mixed crew as they approached the heavily defended homeworld. They saw our diversity as chaos that needed to be controlled. But diversity means that when one approach fails, you have 22 other approaches ready to try. The fleet attacking Kythera Prime looked like something from a fever dream. Sleek Aryan scout ships darted between massive crystalline living vessels that grew new weapons as they flew. Human fighters linked together to form temporary capital ships, then split apart again to confuse Alpha targeting systems. Former Alpha client species flew in perfect formation beside human pilots who couldn't fly straight if their lives depended on it. Defending Kythera Prime was the largest Alpha fleet ever assembled. Over 2,000 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns around their homeworld. High Commander Zorthak commanded the defense personally, determined to prove that Alpha superiority could overcome human chaos. All units, maintain formation, Zorthak ordered as the human alliance approached. Their disorganized attack will break against our disciplined defense like waves against stone. But as the battle began, Zorthak discovered that human waves didn't break. They found a way around, over, under, or through any obstacle. The first surprise came when a group of human ships appeared to retreat, flying directly away from Kythera Prime. Zorthak ordered a pursuit, thinking he was witnessing human cowardice. Instead, the retreating ships led the Alpha pursuers directly into a gravity trap that Pete Williams had designed. The trap used Alpha technology against itself. Williams had learned that Alpha ships relied on perfect gravitational calculations for their movement. By creating artificial gravity fields that constantly changed their properties, he made it impossible for Alpha ships to navigate through certain areas of space. Our ships are trapped in shifting gravity wells, reported an Alpha fleet commander. panic clear in his voice. "The gravitational forces keep changing in patterns our computers cannot predict." "Then calculate manually," Zorthak ordered. "Sir, the patterns appear to be based on human musical compositions. Our mathematicians cannot comprehend how music relates to stellar navigation." Meanwhile, Lisa Rodriguez was leading a different kind of attack. Instead of targeting Alpha military forces directly, her coalition was freeing Alpha slave worlds and turning their own oppressed populations against them. On the industrial world of Vex Prime, millions of workers from dozens of different species had been forced to build Alpha military equipment for centuries. When Lisa's liberation fleet arrived, they found a world ready to explode with revolution. "Brothers and sisters of all species," Lisa broadcast on every communication channel, "the Alpha Dominion kept us divided by convincing us that our differences made us weak. But our differences are our strength. Today we turn their own weapons against them." The revolution on Vex Prime became a masterclass in coordinated chaos. Reptilian workers who understood the planet's underground networks guided mammalian rebels through tunnel systems. Aquatic species sabotaged the water-based cooling systems, while aerial species attacked from above. Each group used their natural abilities in ways the Alpha overseers had never imagined possible. But it was Dr. Amy Clark's contribution to the final battle that proved most devastating to Alpha morale. She had spent months studying captured Alpha prisoners and had discovered something remarkable about their psychology. The 7 Alpha species had evolved on worlds where cooperation meant survival. Over millions of years, they had developed an almost telepathic ability to work together in perfect harmony. This made them incredibly effective leaders and administrators, but it also made them dependent on consensus and predictability. Amy's psychological warfare program exploited this weakness by introducing random elements into Alpha communication networks, not destructive viruses but simple programs that added uncertainty to every message. An order to attack the human fleet might be received as, "Attack the human fleet," maybe, or probably attack the human fleet, or consider attacking the human fleet if convenient. Alpha commanders found themselves second-guessing orders that had been perfectly clear when they were sent. Fleet movements became hesitant and uncoordinated. The perfect Alpha war machine began to stutter and stumble as doubt crept into every decision. High Commander Zorthak felt the change immediately. His officers, who had always executed orders with machine-like precision, were now asking for clarification and requesting confirmation of commands that should have been obvious. "What has happened to us?" he demanded of his staff. "Why do you hesitate to obey simple orders?" "Sir," his chief of staff replied uncertainly, "your order to deploy the 7th Fleet was clear, but the confirmation message suggested that perhaps we should consider other options, and the follow-up communication implied that the deployment might not be necessary if conditions changed." Zorthak stared at his officer in confusion. "I sent no such messages." But Amy's program had been adding those subtle modifications to every communication in the Alpha network for weeks. The species that had ruled the galaxy through perfect coordination was now paralyzed by doubt and uncertainty. The turning point came when Rebecca Stone, now leading the liberated colonies, coordinated a galaxy-wide uprising of all oppressed peoples. The signal went out simultaneously to every world under Alpha control. Today we are all free. Today we choose our own destiny. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings rose up against their Alpha oppressors. Not all the uprisings succeeded, but enough of them did to overwhelm the Alpha military's ability to respond. For every rebellion they crushed, 3 more sprang up elsewhere. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his flagship as the great orbital defenses of Kythera Prime began shutting down one by one, not because they had been destroyed by human weapons, but because the slave workers who maintained them had simply walked away from their jobs. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender signals from 17 Alpha fleet commanders. They're requesting terms for capitulation." Jake looked out at the chaos surrounding Kythera Prime. Alpha ships drifted helplessly in Pete's gravity traps. Other vessels flew in confused circles as their crews struggled with contradictory orders. Some had been taken over entirely by their own maintenance workers, who had learned rebellion from human examples. "Open a channel to High Commander Zorthak," Jake ordered. The main screen showed the Alpha leader in his command center, still surrounded by his perfect technology but looking utterly defeated. His forearms hung limply at his sides, and his glowing blue eyes had dimmed with despair. "I do not understand how this happened," Zorthak said quietly. "We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior organization. How did you defeat us?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "You tried to fight the universe by controlling it. We learned to fight by dancing with it. Your strength came from making everything the same. Our strength came from celebrating everything that was different." Zorthak nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now we learn to build something better together," Jake replied. "The age of empires is over. The age of cooperation begins." As Alpha forces across the galaxy laid down their weapons, the greatest military empire in galactic history came to an end. Not with a final desperate battle, but with the realization that there was another way to live among the stars. 5 years after the fall of the Alpha Dominion, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Beginning Station, watching delegates from over 500 different species arrive for the first galactic assembly. The station had once been the Alpha capital, a perfect monument to order and control. Now it bustled with the beautiful chaos of free peoples working together. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years, said Lisa Rodriguez as she joined Jake at the viewing port. She now served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Liberation Council, spending her days helping former enemy species learn to work together. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Jake replied. "Other times it feels like a lifetime ago." The transformation of the galaxy had not been easy. When the Alpha Dominion fell, it left behind a power vacuum that could have led to centuries of war. Hundreds of species that had been suppressed for millennia suddenly found themselves free, but they had no experience with self-governance. The first year after the war had been the hardest. Some species tried to claim Alpha territory for themselves. Others sought revenge against former oppressors. A few even attempted to rebuild the old empire with themselves in charge. But humanity had learned from Earth's own bloody history. They knew that simply destroying a tyrant wasn't enough. You had to build something better to replace it. Dr. Amy Clark had proposed what she called the Dandelion Protocol. Instead of trying to govern the galaxy from a single capital, the new government would be like dandelion seeds scattered on the wind. Thousands of independent systems connected by trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and cultural exchanges. The old empire controlled through fear, Amy had explained to the early liberation councils. "We'll succeed through cooperation. Every world gets to choose its own path, but no world stands alone." The system had worked better than anyone dared hope. Former Alpha client species discovered they had talents and knowledge that had been suppressed for centuries. The crystalline collective became master terraformers, turning dead worlds into gardens. The Aryans established the galaxy's most efficient communication network, carrying messages between stars faster than any electronic system. Even some of the former Alpha species had found new roles in the liberated galaxy. Many Catherians became teachers and mediators, using their natural ability to understand complex relationships to help settle disputes between worlds. Pete Williams had spent the past 5 years traveling the galaxy, helping rebuild the infrastructure that had been damaged during the war. But he wasn't just fixing things, he was teaching other species how to maintain and improve their own technology. The best part about working with all these different species, Pete had told Jake during his last visit to Earth, is that everyone approaches problems differently. "I've learned more about engineering in 5 years than I did in 20 years of human-only projects." Rebecca Stone had become the unofficial leader of the former slave colonies. She had turned down offers to become a formal government official, preferring to work directly with people who were still learning what freedom meant. "Freedom isn't something you can give to people," she had told Jake during the liberation of her homeworld. "It's something people have to choose for themselves every single day." Her words had become a guiding principle for the new galactic order. No world was forced to join the Galactic Liberation Council. No species was required to adopt human customs or technology, but every being had the right to choose their own path, and the council existed to help them walk it. The economic changes had been just as dramatic as the political ones. Under Alpha rule, the galaxy's economy had been designed to serve the 7 ruling species. Now trade flowed freely between worlds, creating prosperity that reached even the most remote systems. Admiral Kevin Brooks, now retired but serving as an advisor to the Galactic Assembly, often marveled at how quickly things had changed. When we first received Jake's message about the Alpha Dominion, he told visitors to the Earth Memorial, we thought we were preparing for humanity's greatest war. We never imagined we were actually starting the galaxy's greatest peace. But Jake knew the peace hadn't been won through warfare alone. The real victory had come in the years after the fighting stopped, when former enemies learned to see each other as partners rather than threats. He thought about Commander Zexithera, who had once dismissed humans as primitive specimens. She now taught at the Galactic University on New Beginning Station, helping young beings from dozens of species understand the dangers of believing that any one way of thinking was superior to all others. The fear, Alpha Dominion fell because we forgot the most important rule of survival. Zexithara had said during her first lecture, life is not about achieving perfection. Life is about adapting to change. The humans didn't defeat us with superior weapons or tactics. They defeated us by showing us that our perfection was actually a form of death. Jake's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of children laughing in the station's central park. He looked down to see a group of youngsters from at least a dozen different species playing together, creating games that combined elements from all their cultures. A young Catherian girl was teaching human children how to use their four-limbed coordination to climb special trees. Twin Aryan boys were showing crystalline children how to make music by singing in harmonized frequencies that resonated with the crystal being's natural structures. A group of aquatic youngsters had created a water feature where land-dwelling children could experience swimming in 3 dimensions. That's the real victory right there, said Lisa, pointing to the playing children. A generation that thinks working together across species lines is normal. Jake nodded. The children had never known the old galaxy where species were separated by artificial barriers and forced into rigid hierarchies. To them, diversity wasn't something to be feared or controlled. It was just the natural way of things. A soft chime announced the beginning of the assembly session. Jake and Lisa made their way to the Great Hall where representatives from hundreds of worlds had gathered to discuss trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and mutual defense treaties. The hall itself was a perfect symbol of the new galaxy. Instead of the rigid geometric patterns favored by the alphas, it had been designed as a spiral that allowed every delegate to see and hear every other delegate. No seat was higher or lower than any other. No species sat in a position of authority over the rest. As Jake took his place among the other delegates, he reflected on how far they had all come. Humanity had started this journey as a small species trapped in a corner of the galaxy, unaware that they were prisoners in their own home system. Now they were part of something much larger, a galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination, diversity rather than uniformity, and freedom rather than control. The assembly session began with the traditional reading of the Liberation Principles, the document that had established the new galactic order. We, the free peoples of the galaxy, reject the idea that any species, world, or individual must surrender their uniqueness to achieve unity. We declare that our differences are our greatest strength, our diversity our most precious treasure, and our freedom our most sacred right. We pledge to work together not because we are the same, but because we choose to celebrate and learn from everything that makes us different. As the words echoed through the Great Hall, Jake smiled and looked up at the memorial plaque that had been installed near the ceiling. It was a simple piece of metal taken from the hull of the UES Defiance, engraved with words that had become the unofficial motto of the new galaxy. To those who dare to be different in a universe that demands conformity, the stars are yours. The alpha rulers of the stars had been obliterated not by human weapons, but by the human idea that the universe was big enough for everyone to find their own way among the stars.